Good morning, and thank you very much. Thank you sincerely for the privilege of coming and speaking to the senior ministry. When Mrs. Lewis extended the invitation, I was a bit intimidated because I said to myself, as a son and a grandson, I'm used to being in the position of listening to my elders. What is it that I'm supposed to go and say to them? And so we know that in Exodus chapter 20, verses 2 through 17, we find the 10 commandments. And verse 12, the fifth commandment, is the familiar charge to honor thy father and mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord God giveth thee. And when we teach that commandment to our children, and I say we because as a parent, this is how I approached it as well. When we teach that commandment to our children, we typically present it as an instruction on obedience. Honor thy father and mother. We're trying to teach our kids to be obedient. Listen to what your mom and dad tell you. Listen to what your grandma tells you. Listen to what your auntie tells you. We're trying to teach them obedience. And sometimes I have, of late, become much more focused on the second half of the fifth commandment. The first half, honor thy father and mother. But the second half, do so, honor thy father and mother, in order that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord God giveth thee. That's a reminder to me that if I can remember the instruction of my parents, if I can embrace the teachings that they gave me, that's going to help me to succeed. So the fifth commandment is not simply an order to obey. That's part of it. But it's also a promise that if we obey our parents, if we honor our father and mother, that we will prosper. And I've come to see that honoring our father and mother, and I extend that to honoring elders generally. I was blessed, my brother and I, to grow up and to have grandparents and aunts and uncles, and then all those extended people who we encountered through church and through sports and school activities. And one or two or more of the ladies and gentlemen in this room were people who were part of our growing up period. And even now, at 47, being in the church, one of the things, and I was talking to Brother Swain when the reference was made in the Bible about men's chorus. One of the things that I personally draw from that is Brother Swain, Brother Frank, and some of the men who are older than I, who I've just kind of taken on as granddad, uncle, daddy, to sort of help me come along. And then there are these younger guys who are in their 20s and 30s who I find sort of look to me in that respect. And that's a real privilege. It's a deep responsibility, but it's a real privilege. And I try to be worthy of that. Because it's a heavy thing for me to think that someone might be looking to me in a somewhat parental way. And they might be listening to what I say. So I recognize it's pretty important that if I'm going to say something, or if I'm going to set some example, that it be a positive one. And that it be an empowering one. And it's going to be one that's going to help this guy get through these exams at PCC or whatever it is that he may be struggling with. So the concept of honoring our father and mother is one that I've really come to see the full dimensions of. And when we speak of honoring, it goes beyond simply following the instructions. It occurs to me that we can honor our elders by embracing the wisdom that we get from them, by upholding the traditions that they have passed to us, by learning about the lives that they lived in order to have a greater appreciation about where we are. So when I think in terms of how I can honor my father and mother, how I can live up to the commandment of honoring my elders, I realize that it has to do with my connecting with all that they have to offer and trying to be worthy of what they did for me and trying to make sure that I continue the legacy of hard work and success and excellence that they laid down. And indeed, it's also a source of inspiration because when times have gotten difficult for me, and when I found my confidence shaken in the face of challenges, it is then that I recall the struggles faced by my mom and dad, grandparents, aunts and uncles, and various other elders, and reflecting upon what they went through helps buoy me up. When my parents came to California in 1957, they pretty much just had each other. and they've told my brother and I that story many times, and I've made a point of telling my kids, came to a whole different state, little more than their dreams, and found a way to pull together and to draw upon people and to make a life work. I think about my Uncle Fred and the steel mill. Think about my dad delivering mail, because that's what you do to take care of your family. He didn't aspire to deliver mail, but he delivered mail. Think about my granddad out there on the railroad yard, and some of the other, my grandmother, Mimo, was passed on, my mom's mom, down at Kaiser cleaning up, doing what was necessary to provide for, and then always pushing us to be everything that we could be, and always being there to celebrate our triumphs, to hold up a standard of excellence, and to remind us that we could succeed, keeping our confidence built up in that way. Those are the things that affect me when I consider the concept of honoring one's father and mother. When I reflect on the courage and the tenacity and the resilience and the joy in the midst of struggle exhibited by my elders, I feel empowered, energized, and my doubts begin to dissipate and my confidence grows. And equally important, I'm reminded that I have an obligation, that because my mom and dad and grandparents and all these other folks going way back, all those people in slavery whose names I will never know, people who I may not have been directly related to, but who are part of my heritage, all of those people who put so much in with a thought to what the future would be. Their circumstances might have been limited, but they all said to one another and to themselves, it's not going to always be like this, and it's going to be different for our kids. And so that reminds me that one of the ways that I have to honor my mother and father is to be all that I can be. That I must succeed. I have an obligation, no matter what I come up upon, to do my best. I have an obligation to be a success, to build on their hard work and their sacrifices, and to continue that legacy. And that reminds me of the poem Mother to Son, written by the great Langston Hughes. And he writes this poem from the point of view of a mom talking to her son. But I'm a son reading it, and he was a son writing it, which meant he was in touch with what his mom was dealing with. And Brother Hughes begins speaking in the voice, in the vernacular of a mother, and a mother who has struggled. Well, son, I'll tell you. Life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it, splinters, boards torn up, and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time, I's been a-climbing on, and reaching landings, and turning corners, and sometimes going in the dark, where there ain't been no light. So, boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on the steps because you find it's kind of hard. Don't you fail now. For I still going, honey. I still climbing. And life, for me, ain't been no crystal stair. Those words by Langston Hughes speak for mothers and fathers, elders everywhere. And they serve as inspiration to me and a lot of others like me. And so, my basic message to you this morning is one of gratitude. Not only for the time to stand here and speak with you for a moment, but gratitude. Gratitude for everything that you have done and continue to do for all of us. We honor our father and mother, and for that reason, our lives will be long in the land that the Lord has given us. Thank you very much.